So today I'm gonna be showing you how I made this top that I'm wearing. I'm actually gonna be making this one in this video, but it's the exact same pattern for both. So this is the very first pattern I'm ever releasing. I got quite a few requests on TikTok to release a pattern for you guys. As I mentioned, there is a pattern available for this top. It's going to be linked down below. I would not recommend this pattern if this is your very first sewing project. Get a few other simpler projects under your belt and then come back to this one. For this project, you're gonna wanna use a lightweight woven type of fabric. I definitely wouldn't recommend like a stretch or super heavy duty fabric. One that I'm making in this video was actually made with a thrifted bed sheet, which is super budget, which we love. This one that I'm wearing was made with like a lightweight satin charmeuse. So any kind of fabric you want, but stay away from heavy duty fabrics. So for this project, you're going to need some 1/4 inch elastic. You're also going to need some eyelet lace. You can also use this type of lace and just make little snips throughout it to weave your ribbon through it, which you will also need for this project. So let's get into the tutorial. To assemble the pattern, you'll need to print the digital pattern at 100% scale. You'll also need scissors, tape, and a ruler. So once you've printed out your pattern, go ahead and make sure that the test square on the first and last page measures 1.5 by 1.5 inches. Then you're going to start cutting out the borders of your pages. You can see that there are these little half squares on the sides, which are going to be used to line up your pages together. So line up these squares and use tape to attach all your pieces together, and make sure that you follow the template that's included with the pattern instructions so that you attach everything in the correct order. So your pattern should look something like this once everything is taped together. Then you're going to want to cut out your pattern pieces following the size guides on the pattern. There is a size chart included in the pattern, so make sure you follow those recommendations. Today I'm going to be making a size medium. So there are a few markings that you'll want to pay attention to on the pattern pieces. So you want to take note of which pieces need to be cut on the fold, where the grain line is, any gather points. I've also noted how much seam allowance is on each piece, which is for the most part 1/2 inch, but note that the seam allowance is already included, so you don't need to worry about adding it yourself. Now you can go ahead and cut out your pattern pieces, which is what I'm doing here. Make sure when you're cutting on the fold that everything is lying flat and you have no like wrinkles or anything, and as always make sure that you're lining up the grain line properly. You'll also need to cut out 2 strips of fabric for the waist ties, and I recommend cutting them to about 1.5 inches in width and at least 21 inches in length. Go ahead and take your front panel pieces and lay them with the wrong sides facing up. Fold the center front edge in by 1/4 inch and press flat, and do this for both of your panel pieces. Fold this edge over again by 1/4 inch and press, and then you just want to take it over to your sewing machine and stitch this down with a straight stitch. Then you're going to want to fold your top bodice piece in half so that you can mark the center front at the bottom edge. I'm also going to mark my gather points with pins just so that they're nice and obvious. So this is probably going to be confusing because I've slightly rearranged the instructions in this video from the written instructions, but if you're working with a lining for the top bodice rather than a facing, you're going to want to skip ahead to this timestamp and sew the lace onto the top before you sew the gathers into place. So go ahead and follow those instructions first and then come back to this portion of the video. To sew your gathers, you're going to want to set your machine to the longest stitch length and the lowest tension using a straight stitch. Sew 2 rows of gathering stitches without backstitching between your gather points. Try to keep these within the 1/2 inch seam allowance just so that your threads don't show on the final garment. To gather, you just want to pull gently on the bobbin threads and push the fabric until it's gathered nicely. You'll then want to pin your front panels to your bodice piece right sides together, making sure to line them up at the center front. I recommend starting to pin at the center front as well as the side seams and then adjusting your gathers as needed to fit the front panels to the top. Sew your pieces together at 1/2 inch of seam allowance, and be careful when you reach the point where the 2 front panels meet, just so that you don't get any unnecessary gapping between them. You'll need to finish the raw edge of this seam, so if you have a serger, you can use that. If you don't, you can use a normal zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. Here I'm just using what's called an over edge foot with a wide zigzag stitch to finish it off. You'll also want to press everything flat with an iron. Then place your strap pieces right sides together and sew at a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the sides lengthwise. Remember that you cut out 4 pieces, meaning that you'll end up with 2 straps. Then give those straps a good press before turning them right sides out, which you can do with a loop turner or a safety pin. As a side note, always remember to press your seams throughout your project. If I don't explicitly say it, just assume that you should always be pressing your seams flat after sewing. Lay your front piece right sides up and mark 1/2 inch away from the underarm at the very top edge, which you see me doing here. You're then going to take your straps and place them at those 1/2 inch marks before pinning your facing right sides together with the front bodice. This ensures that your straps will be neatly concealed within the top. Also make sure that you finish the bottom edge of your facing either by zigzag stitching or serging. You're then going to sew along the top edge at 1/2 inch seam allowance
starting and stopping at those 1/2 inch marks. Go ahead and press that seam allowance towards the facing. Fold the front in half and mark the center front along the top edge. Then place your eyelet lace so that there are 2 holes aligned at the center front. This will allow for your bow to be centered once the ribbon is inserted. Pin this lace to the front piece only, not the facing. Then just sew along the top and the bottom of the lace to attach it to the top, again making sure that you're not catching the facing or your seam allowance while sewing. Then you can insert your ribbon into the lace by using a safety pin at the end of the ribbon and weaving it through the eyelet holes. I recommend starting at the middle hole so that the long tails of the ribbon are in the center. Then just cut the ribbon to your desired length and repeat for the other half of the lace. Tack your ribbon into place by stitching back and forth a couple times at the edge of the top. Then flip your facing over so that your pieces are touching right sides together and pin along the underarm and then sew along the underarm at 1/2 inch of seam allowance. Here's what everything will look like from the inside. Snip along the corners and the curve of the underarm and turn everything right sides out and press flat. Optionally, you can understitch the seam allowance to the facing to prevent the facing from showing on the finished garment. Pin your back piece and back facing right sides together. Again, make sure that the bottom edge of your facing has been finished in some way, either by serging or zigzag stitching along the bottom. Similar to what we did with the front piece, mark 1/2 inch away from the underarm at the top edge. Then take your front piece and lay it with the wrong side facing up, with the straps laying flat. Insert the straps between the back piece and the facing as you see me doing here. Pin the straps at those 1/2 inch marked points and sew everything together with 1/2 inch seam allowance all along the underarms and the top edge. Snip the seam allowance at the corners and along the curve of the armhole and turn everything right sides out. Also remember to press everything flat. Once again, we're going to mark 1/2 inch from the sides of the underarms, but this time with everything turned right sides out. Then you're going to sew between those marks at 1/2 inch of seam allowance to create a casing for the elastic. Cut your elastic to the correct length for your size, which is indicated in the written pattern instructions, and place a small safety pin at both ends of the elastic. You'll want to watch this next part carefully, so taking one of your safety pins, you want to reach in between your back piece and facing so you can insert the elastic into the casing. From there, just push and pull your safety pin to the other side until you can reach in and grab the safety pin. Go ahead and pin your elastic into place at both edges of your casing and secure them into place with a zigzag stitch. Afterwards, you can remove the safety pins. So with those two strips of fabric that you cut earlier, you want to fold each one in half, sew them into tubes, turn them right sides out and press them flat to create these waist ties. Take these and pin them to your front bodice piece as you see me doing here. I'm using a ruler to make sure that they hit at the same spot on both sides. Then take your back piece and pin along the side seams, making sure the straps are sandwiched between both pieces. Sew the side seams at 1/2 inch of seam allowance and finish the raw edges however you'd like. Now all you need to do is hem the bottom edge of the top all the way around, and I do this by folding the bottom edge twice by 1/4 inch and sewing with a straight stitch. So once you finish that hem, your top is basically complete. So if you followed along, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you love the top that you make. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me by Instagram or the comments below. And also let me know what you'd like to see in the future. Make sure to follow my TikTok and Instagram to get updates on any future patterns that I release. And yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Bye!